But Zarazúa got the win in 3 sets on the hard courts of an ITF event. So, it's been a while since they've played, and of course, EALA has gotten so much better since that time. Really fun matchup here. Should be a nice one for EALA to start with. I think EALA's going to get through in straight sets and get to that second round potentially against
where Zarazúa came away with the win in 3 sets on the hard courts of an ITF event. So it's been a while since these two played, and naturally EALA has improved enormously since then. A genuinely fun matchup here. I think EALA gets through in straight sets and potentially sets up a second-round date with Serena. She has 11 minutes before she has to walk through that tunnel, and she still hasn't looked at the draw sheet pinned to the locker room wall. Someone else already looked at it for her. Someone else saw the name, and now nobody on her team knows how to tell her that the one match she's spent 2 years trying not to think about has just landed in round 1, on the biggest stage in the sport, in front of 40,000 people who didn't come to watch a tennis match. They came to watch a reckoning. You're about to find out why this single first-round matchup at Wimbledon 2026 has tennis insiders calling it the most dangerous draw of the entire tournament. Why a former British #1 says this is the player nobody wants to face right now. And why the last time these two women stood across a net from each other, the result was so quietly devastating that one of them buried it and never spoke about it publicly again. 2 years. That's how long it's been sitting there, untouched, unforgiven. And today it comes to. Let's go back. August 2024. A modest tournament in North Carolina, the kind of event that barely registers outside the sport. Hard courts baking under a Carolina summer. No cameras tracking every step. No nation holding its breath. Just two players the tennis world hadn't yet decided what to make of. One of them was a teenager from the Philippines named Alex. Talented, anyone could see that. The hands, the timing, the fearlessness in how she struck the ball. But she was still raw, still searching for the version of herself that could hold up when a match turned ugly. And on that particular afternoon, it turned ugly fast. She took the first set cleanly, 6-3, dominant, the kind of start that has an opponent's coach quietly drafting their post-match excuses. Then something shifted, not in Alex's game, but in her composure. Across the net, a gritty competitor named Renata started doing what experienced fighters do when they're cornered. She stopped trying to win pretty and started trying to simply win. Second set gone, 6-4. And in the decider, the set that actually reveals who a player is under real pressure, Alex cracked 6-3, match over. Renata walked off with a result that looked like nothing on paper, a first-round score at a low-tier event, the kind of line that disappears into a stats database, forgotten by everyone except the two people who were actually out there. Except Alex never forgot it. Here's the thing about losses like that, the ones that don't cost a title, don't cost ranking points, don't even make headlines. Sometimes those are the ones that cut deepest, because there's no trophy to soften it, no prize money to take the edge off. Nothing but the long flight home and the quiet, humiliating knowledge that she had a set in hand and let it slip away against someone who simply wanted it more in that moment. People close to her camp say she rewatched the footage more than once, not to relive the pain, but to understand exactly where it went wrong, where her footwork got tentative, where her serve lost conviction, where the version of herself that's supposed to show up under pressure simply didn't. So she built a different version. And for 2 years, that version has been quietly and relentlessly assembling itself, match by match, tournament by tournament, almost entirely outside the mainstream spotlight until this season, when it stopped being quiet. Here's where it gets interesting, because this isn't a story about one player's redemption arc in isolation. It's a story about two completely different trajectories that always seemed destined to collide again. While Alex was rebuilding herself into a different competitor, Renata's path went somewhere else entirely, not exactly backward, but not forward either. She's a fighter, no doubt, the kind of player who, on the right day and surface, can manufacture a win out of nothing, just like she did in Carolina. But 2026 hasn't been her year. Her overall win rate sits at a modest 56.7%. She's converting barely a third of her breakpoint chances, 37%, to be precise, which, if you know tennis, tells you she's getting the opportunities, but not closing them. In matches that hinge on 3 or 4 critical moments, that's the difference between competing and merely surviving. She hasn't lifted a single WTA title all season. Her results have come in fits and starts, a win, then a loss, then another loss, a flicker of form, then nothing again. And then there's the surface. Grass, the least forgiving stage in the sport, the one that punishes hesitation and rewards players who can handle a ball that skids low and fast and refuses to sit up and wait for you. Renata's grass court record at WTA level reads 1 win, 5 losses for her career. Over the past 12 months specifically, 1 win for losses. By every measure that matters, she is not a grass court player. She never has been. And now, out of more than 400 possible opponents in this draw, the one waiting for her in round 1 isn't just any grass specialist. She's the most dangerous one in the entire tournament. Sit with that number for a second because it matters more than it sounds like it should. A 40-plus ranking gap. Alex enters as world number 30, seeded 29 at the championships. Renata sits at 76. On paper, that's not even supposed to be competitive. And yet, here's where the psychological weight of this match becomes almost unbearable for whoever has to walk out and face her. Rankings don't account for history. They don't account for the fact that somewhere in Renata's head sits the memory of a hard court in North Carolina where she beat this exact opponent, clawed back from a set down, and walked away the better player that day. Rankings can't measure whether that memory is fuel or a ticking psychological time bomb. Because here's the brutal truth nobody wants to say out loud. Sometimes the players who've beaten you before are the most dangerous ones. Not because they're better than you now, but because some small, stubborn part of your brain still remembers losing to them. And sometimes that memory is exactly what makes a player overthink the shot they should be hitting on pure instinct. But let's talk about what's actually been happening with Alex this season, because the scale of it is hard to overstate if you haven't been following closely. This isn't a promising young player having a nice run story. This is a player who, in the span of a single grass court swing, has become the most talked about name in the entire women's draw, not just among her peers or fans of women's tennis, but among an entire nation that has, by every account, started organizing its daily routine around when her matches begin. 9 wins, for losses across 4 grass court events this season. A WTA 125 title in Birmingham. A semi-final run at the WTA 500 level in Berlin, where she beat not 1 but 2 ranked opponents back-to-back, one of them a former world number 3. A round of 16 finish at Queen's Club, one of the most prestigious grass warm-up events on the calendar. And somewhere in the middle of it all, she found time to team up with Venus Williams. Yes, that Venus Williams for a doubles run in Hamburg, which, symbolically, is almost too fitting. A teenager who once idolized the legends of the sport now sharing a court with one of them, not as a fan, but as a peer. Then there was Birmingham, the final everyone is still talking about. Down 5-1 in the deciding set, the kind of position where most players are already mentally drafting their post-match comments about fighting hard, but it not being their day. Instead, Alex found something, clawed the match back from the brink and won it. Not survived it, won it. That moment, more than any ranking point or trophy, seemed to convince the entire tennis world that something had genuinely shifted in her. Winning when you're playing well is one thing. Winning when you're one bad service game from losing is something else entirely. That's not talent. That's identity. A player who has decided, somewhere deep down, that she no longer loses matches like that. The numbers around her right now are almost surreal for someone who, 2 years ago, was just another junior finding her footing on tour. Nearly 500,000 ticket requests across this grass season alone. The Birmingham final drew roughly 11 million simultaneous live viewers, a figure that didn't just beat the previous WTA record, it obliterated it. The kind of audience usually reserved for major broadcast events, not a 125-level tournament final. Wimbledon's tournament director didn't place her in this draw on a gut feeling or sentiment. He looked at hard broadcast data, ticket demand analytics, and commercial projections, the cold, unsentimental numbers one of the most tradition-bound institutions in global sport relies on before any major decision. And those numbers told him to expect her matches alone to bring in 40,000 fans through the gates. 40,000 people for a first-round match. Let that sink in because first-round matches at Wimbledon don't typically command that kind of attention. Stars do. Stories do. And right now, Alex is both. So, what exactly is making her must-watch tennis right now? It isn't just one thing. It's a combination that's almost unfair to opponents on this particular surface. She's left-handed, and if you don't follow the sport closely, you might not appreciate just how disproportionately dangerous that is on grass. A lefty slice serve doesn't behave like a normal one. It doesn't sit there waiting to be hit. It slides, curving away from a right-handed returner's body at the exact moment they're trying to set their feet, pulling them off the court and opening up space for a player who, by every account, is taking the ball earlier and more aggressively than ever before. A former British number one, who happens to be left-handed himself, meaning he isn't speculating, he's speaking from lived experience with that exact mechanical edge, has openly said this season that she is, in his words, the player to watch on the entire women's side. Not one of the players, the player. He pointed specifically to Berlin, to that back-to-back run through two ranked opponents, and called it nothing short of spectacular. But here's what separates this story from 1,000 other rising star narratives, and it's the part that should genuinely give you chills if you understand what's actually riding on these matches for her. A tennis commentator, someone who's covered the sport long enough to know the difference between a player chasing ranking points and one chasing something bigger, said something about Alex that stuck with people all season, that when she wins, it doesn't feel like a player has won a tennis match. It feels like she's won it for an entire country. Over 100 million people watching, hoping, feeling every point land or slip away with her. Most professional athletes will tell you that kind of pressure is a weight, a burden, the kind of thing that crushes promising careers before they ever fully bloom. For Alex, by every visible sign this season, it's the opposite. It's fuel. It's the reason her post-match reactions, raw, unfiltered, almost overwhelmed the second the final point lands, have become must-watch moments in their own right, clipped and shared by people who've never picked up a racket in their life. Now bring all of that back to the locker room, back to round one, back to a player who beat her once on a hard court 2 years ago in front of almost nobody, and has spent every day since wondering whether she'd ever get the chance to do it again, and whether, if she did, the Alex she'd be facing would still be the one she remembers. She won't be. Everyone who's watched this season unfold knows that. The surface alone tips this overwhelmingly in one direction. Grass is statistically and historically the worst possible stage for Renata to try to repeat what she pulled off in Carolina. The ranking gap, the recent form, the lack of a single title all season, the crumbling breakpoint conversion numbers, none of it points toward an upset. And the player she's facing isn't just better now. She's playing with a level of conviction, aggression, and surface-specific comfort that simply didn't exist in her game 2 years ago. The slice serve that slides away. The early, aggressive returns. The composure under set point pressure that Birmingham just proved beyond doubt. Every piece of evidence says this shouldn't be close. And yet, and this is the part that should keep you watching once this match actually starts, tennis has a long, well-documented history of humbling absolute certainty. Of players who shouldn't win finding one good day, one hot streak of returns, one moment where an opponent's nerves catch up with the weight of the occasion rather than the difficulty of the tennis. 40,000 fans is an extraordinary number of people to perform in front of for the first time on this stage. A nation of 100 million watching is an extraordinary amount of pressure to carry onto a court, even for a player who has so far turned that pressure into rocket fuel rather than dead weight. Nobody, not the ranking system, not the analysts, not the former British number one who called her the player to watch, can promise with absolute certainty what happens when these two players actually step onto that court and the first ball is struck in anger. What we do know is this. 2 years ago, at a tournament nobody was watching, on a surface that didn't matter, two players who hadn't yet become who they were going to become walked off that court with one win and one loss. And only one of them carried it forward as unfinished business. Today, on the most famous tennis court on the planet, in front of 40,000 people and a broadcast audience that could dwarf even Birmingham's record, that business finally gets settled one way or another. The story has already been written by everyone watching from the outside. The form, the surface, the momentum, the numbers, they all point in the same direction, toward Alex finally closing the door on the one result from her past that never stopped following her around. But matches aren't decided by narratives. They're decided point by point, game by game. when the crowd noise fades into the background and it's just two players, a tennis ball, and 2 years of history sitting on every single shot. All that's left now is for her to walk through that tunnel, step onto that court, and find out if the story everyone's already written turns out to be the one that actually gets played. Tennis Unfiltered.